USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Weekend Review podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. A look at this weekend in college hockey and a review of the top news of the week.
Welcome to the USCHO Weekend Review podcast for Monday, November 15th, 2021. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. Well, why don't we start with Michigan? A great weekend. They're the new number one in the USCHO.com men's Division I ice hockey poll. After losing 2 of 4 in previous weekends, they've swept back-to-back weekends with Michigan State and Penn State. Power play 6 for 19 in the last 4 games, a power play that is scary good.
Well, I'm really excited about this show to throw a little mailbag into the second half of our to get some outside questions. So that's going to be exciting to get other questions and just from you, Ed. So we've got a little excitement brewing here. But I watched the Thursday game and I thought Michigan dominated that hockey game. And sometimes the shots are a lot closer on because of Penn State funneling a lot of pucks in that, Penn State getting a lot of chances, but they just kind of took that game over. And you watch them, and I talked about it, with their goaltending and with their offense and with their blue line coming together, and Garrett Van Wayne being probably the best third line center in what I think is college hockey, be a top line center anywhere else. I thought they were just outstanding, and I think they've exuded a little dominance here to start the Big Ten with 4 straight wins over Michigan State and Penn State.
And you mentioned it, Ed, the power play. If you're taking penalties against this Michigan team, and listen, they have speed and they're going to draw penalties because of their speed. But if you take penalties against Michigan, prepare to pay the price. I mean, this is a power play that's, you've got, basically on your first unit, you have 5 players that are all going to play in the NHL within the next 2 years. And you put those 5 guys on the ice. And now, as I thought the first week of the season, they look good. As the season is rolling on, and the more I look at the power play, they almost look like a good NHL power play. The puck movement, the deception, the ability to cross seams with passes, shooting off the pass. I think that this is a dominating power play. You want to give them an opportunity with the extra man. You're taking major risks.
Well, I think the one thing that we talked about it maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago is to beat them, you're going to have to play physical. And I think it's a combination of playing physical and playing clean, because you've got to play physical. You've got to play smart. You can't take that penalty for the extra shot or anything like that to put them on the power play. And I think you're seeing it, the Western Michigan, a little bit older team, kind of had their way physicality with them. And now you've got the guys getting back into Big Ten play. You've got kind of like little younger teams in Michigan State and Penn State, and you're seeing them get back to the way they were. So I think there's a fine line between playing physical and playing hard to beat them and staying out of the penalty box.
Well, let's turn to Boston University. Last week when we did a buy or sell in our second segment, it was a strong sell on BU, but they kind of salvaged some stuff with an overtime win and a loss in the shootout with UMass. Pretty good turnaround for the Terriers on that weekend.
Yeah, it certainly was. And I called that game on Nesson on Saturday. And what a great game that was. They let, BU jumped out to a 2-0 lead. At times were dominating UMass. And you could tell that they knew that was a game they needed. Getting just 1 point on Friday night, despite a 2-2 tie, just 1 point in the Hockey East standings, they were frustrated. They knew they had played well. They outshot UMass 5-0 in overtime on Friday, came away with nothing. And then, UMass is UMass. They are getting better and better every weekend, to the fact that I feel like they are almost as good as last year's team. And I can see it on the ice, and they came back from 2-0 down, scored 3 goals, take a lead. The third goal was a shorthanded goal that drew a penalty. But then during that 4-on-4 play that ensued, BU gets the tying goal. Then it became just kind of a chess match, and BU finally wins it in overtime. And you could see, looking at Albie O'Connell's face on the bench, the excitement. You don't see a lot of regular season celebrations where all 4 coaches are hugging each other. after a win, and you could see the excitement. I could see every player walking down the runway afterwards, and Albie O'Connell sitting there, big fist bumps for every single player. He knew how big this was. This was his team's test. This might be the weekend that puts BU back on the right direction. They only end up getting 3 out of 6 points. So it's almost like you feel like you split a weekend. But I think emotionally, this was a big one for Boston University.
Yeah, we talked about it. I mean, this is a tough gauntlet for them that they're going to run here to see kind of where they're at. But, obviously getting 3 of 6 points is a lot better than they have been doing. But I think it's very easy to get fired up for the defending national champions. So let's see how they continue with this tough stretch they have to see where they are, because I think we talked about them potentially will know a lot more at Christmas time when they go on their break of where they're at. So I think that if we can, see how they follow up and then see how they continue and where they are at Christmas. But they really only got 55% of a pairwise point, though. You got to remember that.
The one thing I will say, Derek, they are getting healthier, and that's a big factor for them. Jay O'Brien was back in the lineup this weekend. He was the best player on the ice both nights, most shots on goal on Friday night, and then Saturday ended up with a goal and assist, I believe. But he was the best player on the ice. They need Luke Tuck back. They need Matt Brown back. Those are two big. I mean, you put O'Brien, Tuck, and Brown. That could be your first line at BU. That's how good those 3 players are that they've been missing. So I think that once they get everybody back and healthy, they're going to be a pretty good team.
Well, we were very high on Harvard. They were averaging 6 goals a game. They had a loss in non-league play, sort of a beanpot preview, I suppose, a loss in overtime to Northeastern. Then they had to make that long North Country road trip up to Clarkson in St. Lawrence, losing 6-2 to Clarkson, and then a 1-1 tie with St. Lawrence, winning the shootout. So 2 of 6 points on the road in the ECAC. Is this just a blip for Harvard, or are they just kind of coming down to earth?
Well, and their power play that was at, I think we had it from the previous week, college hockey, all the stats had them at like 1,000% was where they at, like 7 for 7. That's my inside. We miss college hockey stats .net plug for the week. But, I think that we'll find out a lot where they stand in the ECAC. That's a tough trip up there. And, to play a game midweek and then to have to make that trip to be able to get those 2 teams. And Clarkson needed to get a high quality win too. And obviously Brent Brecky's doing a good job at St. Lawrence. So I think we'll find out once again, they are still about probably about 3 weeks behind everybody else. So I think we're still going to start seeing them start coming together a little bit more. We've got a lot of history. We've got a lot of video. We've got a lot of stuff on other teams. We don't have a lot on Harvard. And sometimes it's real easy to get up at the beginning. And then when they get moving into a solid path, we'll find out a little bit more about them.
Yeah, there was 5 games in 9 days that Harvard ended up playing, I believe, or maybe it was in 5 and 8. I mean, that's a really tough stretch. And then throw in the 7.5 hour ride from Cambridge up to North Country, and that's your closing 2 games. I was talking with somebody on Friday night, and they said, "Oh, Harvard got thumped by Clarkson 6-2," and I said, "That's the North Country for you." And I can remember my days working at Lowell, and that was a nightmare trip. It wasn't just that it was long, but it was also the fact that you're always playing a good opponent in really hostile environments. And those wins were harder to come by up there. So I think we can forgive these. You just don't want to see it become a pattern. By the way, going back to the overtime loss they had to Northeastern, that both teams played great games. Northeastern came out on top in that one. So I don't want to just totally skate past that one, because that was a good effort by Harvard. But, I do kind of look at, this is one of those weekends you can kind of write off. And as long as it doesn't become a trend, you don't want to see, a 5-game or a 7-game winless streak come out of this. 3 games in a row without a win, I think we're okay.
Derek, let me ask you about what it must be like to be an ECAC head coach, where you have travel partners and every weekend you're preparing for 2 different teams. What kind of extra challenges would that be?
Well, that's extremely hard. And I think the we saw it a little bit last year, and with COVID, you were playing some different opponents and different nights, and it's hard on the assistants because you have to prepare for two opponents, but you can't really get past the first one until that game's over, because you don't want to start talking about game two until game one's over, and you got less than sometimes 18 hours to prepare for the others. So you have scouting reports done, but you haven't talked in depth as you did all week about your first opponent. So when you play two opponents, we're working on their penalty kill. We're working on what we see on their power play all throughout the week. Then that game's over. Then you have to visually start working on the other team when you have two different opponents. So it is a challenge. It is hard. And I'll tell you, my assistants throughout the years hated playing two different opponents on the weekends. And we used to do it in Atlantic Hockey when we played teams 3 times. We'd come play RIT on a Friday night and then stop in Buffalo and play Niagara Canisius on Saturday. So it is a challenge, and it is something that I'll tell you, the assistant coaches don't like it. That's for sure.
Well, at least the good thing about playing in the North Country is you can stay in the same hotel both nights.
100%. Yeah.
St. Cloud State hosted Omaha, number 11 Omaha going into the weekend, St. Cloud number 1 going into the 2 games. St. Cloud lost on Saturday 3-2 in overtime after thumping Omaha 5-1 on Friday. So 4 out of 6 points on the weekend for the Huskies, who now go on to face Western Michigan and North Dakota over the next 2 series. When we talked to Brett Larson before last week's game, Jim, he mentioned that he would be happy to get 4 wins out of those 6 games. So he's gotten 1 and 4 points, but that it looks good for Omaha out of that weekend too.
It does. For St. Cloud, it's what bumps them out of number 1 this week and puts Michigan in the poll. But I think that's the least of Brett Larson's concern right now. He was really set on the fact that he wants to be able to take at least more than 3 points out of every weekend. And this one, despite the fact that it becomes a split, he ends up with 4 or 6 points because he gets to overtime one night. So that's pretty big. And, and if you get 4 out of 6 points even out of the next 2 weekends, you might end up with 3 losses in there, but that's not going to be having as high of an impact as if you were to lose 3 games in regulations and only get half of the points. So, or even, potentially that lost weekend where you get 0 points. So I understood where he was coming from. He kind of, there was a lot of smirk as we were looking at his face when he was talking about it, because it is a really tough road that they have here to have Omaha, Western, and North Dakota, 3 straight series. I believe there's a weekend off between Western and North Dakota. So you have a little time to regroup and maybe heal in that off week, but you got to find a way to come out of here with 4 out of 6 points. So I think even though you took a loss, you might've slipped in the poll. No worries. I think Brett Larson feels that was still a successful weekend.
Yeah, and you look at, and we talked about Omaha, first time traveling on the road. So were we buying or selling? I don't know if we talked about them, because we have talked about them. Their first road games of the year, and they get 2 of 4 or 2 of 6. So I don't know if that's as impressive as as it could be, because I think you're going to see a little bit of a measuring stick when it comes to Omaha here now that they've got to start getting some road games, because now they get back, they got to go to Alaska, and they get Colorado College at home, and then they have to go to Western Michigan. So you're going to see a little bit of what Omaha does over the next couple of weeks.
But two of 6 against the number 1 team, that's not bad. I think you still take that, right?
You want to get split on the road. You're split on the road, sweep it home. I mean, if you're going off that model, you didn't get the job done. Are you happy with it? Yeah, St. Cloud's a tough place to play. You're going to an Olympic ice sheet. You're doing a lot of different things. You got to change the way you play. I don't know in Omaha if they have an Olympic ice sheet anywhere to practice on. So that's a challenge. So you've got a little bit. I guess that you can let it slide because it's close, but it still is like I said, split on the road and get all 6 at home. That'll make up for the time where you can't get 7 at home to make up for it. As far as St. Cloud goes, you've got a challenging. I mean, this is a murder. Once again, we talk about gauntlets, and this is a tough stretch. Not only do you get to Omaha, you got to go into a tough place in Kalamazoo, and they're not going to be happy after coming off getting swept at Denver. And then like you said, you got a week off to get ready for for the Fighting Sioux. Oh wait, I can't say that. Fighting Hawks. So I don't know. I would say that's a minor blip as far as St. Cloud goes. They're a good hockey team. They're going to be a perennial top 5. And, you have a rough weekend, you go down to 5, you have a good weekend, you're back at number 1. And like I said, we'll keep seeing them win hockey games and keep talking about them.
We're going to talk about Denver and their weekend sweep over Western Michigan, plus Quinnipiac sweep with visiting Arizona State when we continue, plus Mailbag here on USCHO Weekend Review.
This is the USCHO Weekend Review podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online.
This is the USCHO Weekend Review podcast. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. We talked a bit about Denver last week and how important it was going to be for them to have a good weekend, as they didn't want to dig a hole like they did last year, and they rebounded from 4 losses with a sweep of Western Michigan.
Yeah, that's a good comeback. It's a good bounce back because Western's been playing very well, and you just can't let that snowball. And obviously, I didn't get a chance to see any of those games or highlights, but I mean, just looking at the box scores, those are big wins for Denver to kind of try to right their ship a little bit. They didn't give up a lot. They scored 5 each game, and just to continue down the road that they've got to go. And there's no off weeks in the NCHC. I mean, you think that you have it, even for them, if you go. You think you're going to get an off week when you play what's perceived as a bottom Colorado college team, but that's the Gold Pan weekend. That's a rivalry weekend. So you're not getting anything that's really, I per se, cheap in the NCHC. And to where, hey, we can take this weekend off and we're still going to get the points we need. And good for them to stop the snowball from going even farther downhill.
Yeah, now I think you kind of mentioned in the last segment, Derek, what's Western's bounce back now? They've got a tough opponent now with St. Cloud this weekend, but I would think that they'd be hungry. And, that's one thing I've seen more coaches be very good at getting their teams to rally from losses, more so than even building winning streaks. And we have a couple of teams out there with some 8 and 7 and 6 game unbeaten streaks right now, but you don't see at this point, you don't see anybody would say a double-digit win streak or a double-digit unbeaten streak, because the opponents that they're facing, there's more hunger. I like the way we've seen more teams bounce back this season, and Denver was a really good example here, having been swept back-to-back weekends. So if Western goes out into St. Cloud, they've got some hunger now, and I said go out, they're going to actually be hosting it. So you've got 2 home games here against a very good St. Cloud team. Will you have the hunger to bounce back? That's the big question I think that faces the Broncos.
And throw on the fact that they got the Broncos, they got the Huskies at home. Then they got to travel out to the North Country, and they're going to play St. Lawrence. But that's just not some random series. That's a Pat Ferschweiler, Western Michigan grad against Brent Brecky, Western Michigan grad. And Brent's first time playing his alma mater as a head coach, and they were roommates. And the reason I know they were roommates is because I was across the hall from them. So I played all 4 years with Brent. I played 3 with Pat. Pat only had 3 years. And I'll tell you, those are, as a head coach, you still want to beat your alma mater. And I'll always say, if you go back and look at my career record, we played Western Michigan once at Robert Morris. And the reason we only played them once is because we won, and I wanted to retire 1-0 against my alma mater. So it's hopefully I'm not retiring, and hopefully I'll take another chance right now to get everything going again. But that's going to be an emotional series for Brent up there and for Pat as well.
Let's turn to Quinnipiac. They hosted Arizona State over the weekend, and I remember checking scores on Friday evening and seeing Arizona State up 3-0 over Quinnipiac, but the Bobcats came back to win 5-3 and won on Saturday as well. So it was a very good weekend for Quinnipiac. And probably a difficult one for Arizona State. That's going to be a big impact in the pairwise as the season goes on for Arizona State.
Well, Arizona State needs the wins right now. I'm pretty sure they're 6-6, so they've got some. I don't feel like they have a ton of quality wins. Their opening night win against UMass Lowell at the time maybe not have seemed great, but the way the Riverhawks have played, maybe that's a one that's going to get them there. But they needed to go on the road and win a big game, and they were in such good position on Friday night. So to let that one slip, but the quality of comeback for Quinnipiac is huge. That was impressive. So I really liked the way that they fought back, didn't give up. I like this Quinnipiac team. I know all three of us were on the buy side when we did buy sell last week on Quinnipiac, and it was the easiest one we probably had up there. But everything that they're doing week after week is solid, and they've only got one loss. I think there's only 4 teams left with only one loss. They're one of them. I like everything about this Quinnipiac team.
Difficult schedule for Arizona State. I mean, obviously you're traveling coast to coast. You're playing as an independent, but like you said, they need some wins. And this was Greg Powers felt that this might be one of his best teams he's had. And right now it's 6-6. I'm sure he's probably not thrilled, but he does have a chance to right the ship pretty well here over the next couple weeks. They've got an off weekend this week, but then they've got Bemidji State at home for 2. A Wednesday, Friday, with Thursday being Thanksgiving. Then they got Denver at home for 2 and Clarkson at home for 2, and then a short trip to Colorado College. So if you're looking for wins for that team, I know we talked extensively about Quinnipiac last week that we're all high on them. But if you're looking for wins for Arizona State, I think that's with short travel, 6 games at home, they've got to come out on the winning side of those 8. I would say 6-2. When you think to try to get themselves back into, an NCAA tournament kind of in that talk about category?
I think that's right. But, it's capitalizing on Oceanside, tough building to go into play in. And, they've had some great success at home. This is where it really gets to pay off of this little stretch of games.
Yeah. I mean, they need it.
Well, let's turn to the mailbag. We took some questions on Twitter. And we're going to start out with this first one. And I think we're going to aim this one at Jim because he's the Hockey East guy around here. It's from Paul Chase, and he wants to know, is UMass Lowell the real deal? Do they have something with Owen Savory in net?
I'm still going to say that the jury's out. Great start to the season, just one loss at this point. But when you look at who they played, they probably look at this schedule and say, wow, we had a really tough slate up front. 2 at Arizona State. They had 2 against Boston University. They had Northeastern and BC, both of those games this past weekend at home. All those games, they end up going 5-1 or I just lost my count, but 5-1 in those 6. Great. That's the big plus. But now we have to look at where all of these teams are. And I know we're not supposed to talk pairwise at this point, and teams can flip in the pairwise really quickly. But I believe all these teams are 25 or lower in the pairwise right now. And it's, you can't control your schedule and who's good, but they have not played the teams that are playing their best hockey right now. BC has had some great spurts. At times, I think they look great. We talked about BU earlier. Northeastern at times looks great. That's probably the biggest quality win for UMass Lowell on their schedule right now. But that's going to, Northeastern's going to have to continue to play well for that win to become a solid win. And in terms of Owen Savory, I do like the way he's playing. The great thing for him is that he's in the system. Last year was so screwed up. The school year starts. He was at RPI. He started his semester there, then decided he wanted to transfer. Couldn't transfer until he finished his semester at RPI. Couldn't practice with Lowell till after the new year. And then he got thrown into a game pretty quickly and didn't, have the best performance. Didn't have a good season in general. Only got to play half a year. He's been now with the goaltending coaches. He's been in Norm Bazin's system for a little longer. I like him, the way he has turned things around, 4-0-1 at this point in the season. He will be a good goaltender. But I still think Lowell needs a few more tests, and they need some big tests, some road tests. They need to show me that they can pass those tests before I'm going to say that they're absolutely a legit team.
I got nothing to add on that. I mean, he's sitting here. We're doing this via Zoom. He's got the Riverhawks quarter zip on. So I don't think there's anything more that I could have went in depth on that.
I got one follow-up on that one, Jim. How much does it depend on whether Norm can have the Riverhawks play their heavy style of game, and how much is it if they're chasing a game?
They're not a good chaser. I mean, they have had some good comebacks. LIU, they shouldn't have gotten down probably to LIU, but they did, and they came back, took a lead, and still ended up giving that away. It ended up becoming a tie. They came back a couple of times against Michigan State to earn a tie there. But I think the better the opponent, the tougher it is going to be to come back. So I don't think they can chase the game, but they can play heavy hockey. Derek, you mentioned, I think it was Greg Powers the first week of the season said that Lowell was one of the heaviest teams he's played in all of his years coaching in Division I. So I think that that heavy style is going to pay off. Their transfers are really clicking. They've got good players like Andre Lee and Ben Meehan who are putting the puck in the net for them right now. But I still want to see them, I guess ask me this question in a month and I'll try to see where I think Lowell is.
Well, we've got a question from Chad Radke, and he asked, so far, which team do you feel did the best with the transfer portal? We've each picked one of them. We'll start with Derek. Who's your choice on that?
Well, I mean, it was easy to be able to go to North Dakota, and they're going to, and this is the interesting thing about the transfer portal and the fifth year, to be able to get the extra year and to be able to replace holes very easy. They're going to always have a guy or two sign. Jake Sanderson, is he going to use all 5 years? I don't think so. So, to be able to go and be able to pick and choose that extra player off the transfer portal will be really good for them. You highlight Ashton Calder, who was Lake Superior's leading scorer last year at 79 points in 107 games with Lake Superior. He's got 13 and 11 right now. You got Connor Ford, who is also an all-league WCHA player at Bowling Green, who's got 10 points in 10 games, who had 114 career points. The thing about Calder is he's got another year. He could come back and use that fifth year. The reason he left was because Lake Superior doesn't have grad school. So he can actually play another year after this. And then you got guys that left because their programs didn't play last year. Chris Jandrick had 37 points as a defenseman coming in and at Fairbanks, and he's done a good job. And then the big talk kind of Andy Johnson, Luke Strand on Sioux City, they were talking about Brady Ferner, who left RPI. And that was all over Twitter about how they were so impressed with him. And, the Sioux City guys were like, no doubt. And you look at, he played 70 games at RPI coming in. And then you get the goaltender. So you graduate your goalie, he signs a pro deal, and you go out and you get an all-league. Maybe, I'm not even sure if Driscoll might have been an honorable mention All-American, or he was pretty close to being an All-American. But you get Zach Driscoll, who had already had 4 years of eligibility used. 1 at St. Cloud in the NCHC, 3 at Bemidji, had went to an NCAA tournament. We talked about him getting booed when he went back to Bemidji. He hasn't had the numbers that he's had at the other places, but you're talking about one of the top 5 goalies in the nation that they're able to pick up. And you just go back, and I think you're going to see this from programs. If they lose somebody big and they know they're going to lose somebody big, they're going to hold that spot to try to get that next big guy with that extra year of eligibility.
I'll go with UMass. And the reason I actually say that they're successful is because they got the latest start. They couldn't really do anything until after the Frozen Four. And they knew they had holes. They knew that Philly Lindbergh, their goaltender, was going. Did they bring somebody in? No. I mean, they did, but, they end up with Matt Murray coming back for a 5th year. He's the only guy they were able to keep from the national championship team. They had Cam Donaldson and Matt Baker coming in from the Ivy League. That was stuff that they had to do before the Frozen Four. They had these plans in place. So that was the reason they had to let go of Oliver Chow, who ended up at Quinnipiac. They had to let go of Phil Legg and ended up at Vermont. And then they bring in Slava Demin, who I feel has really had a good impact transferring from Denver. He's been pretty solid. I just think it was the lack of ability to plan because of how far they went in the tournament hurt them a lot. By the time they got into the portal, so many players were gone, but they still had the strategy, and it's paying off. They're playing better, and some of these new faces, when healthy, are making impacts in their lineup.
But I will tell you this, Matt Murray did go into the portal.
He did.
And yes, he went into the portal and was going to go if Lindbergh came back. So then when Lindbergh came back, obviously that's a tough conversation. You have to re-recruit some of these players because I guarantee you he had some schools, and I know, Ed, you're going to touch on Quinnipiac, like a St. Cyr, Notre Dame was looking for a goaltender. I mean, so you have to still kind of re-recruit them and to be able to go. And he didn't get to play in the national championship game. So there was a little bit of re-recruiting going on there. So this portal thing's an interesting dynamic because, once you go in the portal, you can take their money. You can take their scholarship money and give it to somebody else. And the kids know that. So it's kind of a little bit of game of chicken, and you're trying to recruit them to, hey, we want you to stay, we want you to stay, we want you to stay. But then they go and you can't be left holding the bag.
I did misspeak too. I said that they picked up a goaltender. They did not. It was Matt Murray that they were able to pull out of the portal once he got in. That was where I was going with that. But you're right. There's dangers and there's tricks on both sides. As a coach, what you can do, but sometimes you can re-recruit. And that's one of those, key moments when you know that you still have that hole. Can you get the player back in once he enters the portal?
I'm going to take a look at Quinnipiac, and not because they had a lot of holes to fill, but they got some key players that make them just a little bit better. We mentioned Dylan St. Cyr. He comes over from Notre Dame. Rand Pecknold has been platooning him with Yanni Peretz, the freshman. To have two goaltenders there, and I don't know if he's going to continue to platoon or whether he's going to see if one rises to the top. But when you have two very good goaltenders, that puts you in a good position going down the road if there's an injury or if somebody gets hot or somebody gets cold. And then Oliver Chow, graduate transfer, has the experience of winning a national championship at UMass. He's got 5 goals, 9 points in 12 games for the Bobcats. I think those are nice incremental pickups. A total of 5 transfers that Rand Pecknold picked up, and 3 of them are playing pretty regularly. Just a little bit of an extra edge that may pay off for him in playoff time.
And I went and looked when we got the mailbag question. I saw it last night. The number is usually for some of these teams is about 5. The average number of people, and obviously you have some that are disadvantaged, like the Ivy Leagues who struggle to take them, and the service academies. And we could have a whole show on Frank and Brian's thoughts on the transfer portal. But AIC took 5, Bentley took 5, Canisius 7, Sacred Heart 8, Arizona State 5, LIU 8. So there are some a little bit higher than it, but 5 seems to be a number that pops up an awful lot.
And I want to maybe give an honorable mention to teams you mentioned from Atlantic Hockey. Canisius, Bentley, and Sacred Heart has paid off for those teams. Canisius had 6 transfers in the lineup both nights over the weekend. And I think it's going to help these teams. It was interesting earlier in the year when we talked to Nate Lehman at Providence. He said, when people were talking about transfers, teams in Atlantic Hockey thought it might hurt them as maybe their top players might get plucked away to some bigger programs. His thought is it's helping the Atlantic teams by allowing them to get some decent players that are in. Derek, maybe you don't agree?
I don't know. You once again, you got to recruit your players the whole time. And, Bentley brought in 5 guys, but they also lost 2 of their better players, so those are, do you think that Ryan would still like those 2 guys at the top 2 guys he left, Santurno and I'm losing, I can't remember. Novak. I mean, yeah, you don't think Ryan would still like those guys? So yeah, he got 5, but he lost his best guys. And it's worked out very well for him. And maybe sometimes it is just time to move on from players too. And sometimes you wish them the best and thank them for their service and thank them for everything they've done for your program, and we'll hope that they do well when they don't play you. So once again, I would hate to lose my best players.
But Derek, if a player is unhappy, can't that be a negative in the locker room? If you have a player that doesn't want to be there, isn't it sometimes better just to have those players elsewhere?
Yeah. And that's what I said. Sometimes you thank them and say, I wish you the best of luck at other places.
Well, the third question we're going to tackle from the mailbag is from Boblin Mavericks.
I'm excited about this one.
As the NCAA just changed the women's tournament, do you see any big changes for the men's tournament?
Well, I'll start being on the championship committee the last 3 years. And, this will be a little controversial statement, but rumblings I'm hearing, there's a lot of coaches out there that want to change the pairwise and overtime to 100% to zero. Right now, every time you get an overtime win, it's 55.55, and the loser gets 0.45. There's a lot of rumblings out there that they want people to put their money where their mouth is when it comes to 3-on-3 overtime and go 100 to zero. And that would really, really shake things up as far as how we pick that tournament. And I was fortunate. I got to be on the tournament committee when we had to go through, and it was not a cigar-filled room. It was on Zoom. And I thought we did a very good job picking the tournament last year. And kudos to all the people on the committee, because it was hard. But that would really shake something up when it comes to that. And I think that would be a really controversial. I'd love to. I hope that I'm down at the convention. I hope that I get to see everybody's face, and I hope to get to see reactions if that is brought to the convention floor. 100 to zero overtime 3-on-3, and watch out. Let the sparks fly.
Might that cause a compromise to do it like the women's national collegiate tournament does, where it's 2/3, 1/3?
And maybe. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, you get 2 points anyway. I mean, but I don't know. Guys were really hesitant to give more. Like, we put a whole bunch of proposals together: 55-45, 60-40, 66-33, and even 75-25. And the overwhelming for men was 55-45. But they didn't expect, this is the one thing, and you go back this year, they didn't expect it to be an L in your record. And I think that's what drives some people crazy. And I'll say that I think the majority of us didn't think there would be an L in your win-loss. You thought you'd still get the tie, but you're getting an L, and but you also get a W too. That's the benefit.
People don't like it, but I still say that the NHL formula works the best. You don't get a full loss; you get a half a loss, or you get a half a win if you lose an overtime or a shootout. You get a full win if you win the game. I know it makes it, 2 points become 3-point games, and there's now, disproportionate points. I don't care. They still have it right. And then if you win a game in a shootout, that goes in a separate column and only is used if you end up tied in the standings. I still think that the NHL formula would work better than anything. And coaches are so caught up on percentages and the need for the RPI to be the most impacted thing. But I don't think that we have gotten, I think we have the right system, 3-on-3 overtime and a shootout, just like the NHL. I don't think until somebody gets off of this percentage stuff, we're not going to really get the right formula for college hockey.
People didn't like the 5 columns. They didn't like all the columns.
No.
Because it goes back to, the history of our game. And I don't think people can get over that, adding the extra columns to your wins, losses, and ties. And it'll be interesting to see how that moves forward. I know that that would be something controversial. I mean, there's so many different things we talked about on the committee. And I know you want to throw a few of them out, Jimmy, right now. And
yeah, I think that, where Boblin Mavericks was probably going with this question, is there anything in terms of expansion or changing of the actual tournament? And there, I don't see anything changing. 16 is a good number for men's. It's maybe even more than they deserve. Most college sports try not to have more than a quarter of your field. Right now, men's and now women's have 27%. I don't think that's going to change. The one thing I love is the change that we've already made, and it's moving the regionals to a 3-day event. So you play either Thursday, Saturday, or Friday, Sunday. You never have to play back-to-back days in a regional, which I thought was just a crazy system to try to force things into 3 days instead of 4. It's going to be more expensive. You got to put teams and staffs and bands and cheerleaders up in a hotel for an extra night, but I think it makes the regionals more fair. I still personally, and I know this isn't going to happen, you'll shoot this one down, Derek, I wish they would move regionals into 2 cities instead of 4 and have, basically 8 teams there and do, play it over a longer span like they do in basketball. But that doesn't seem to be garnering much favor. And to change anything related to the Frozen Four, you'd have to be looking at least 5 years out because they have bid out the next 4 Frozen Fours, and you won't really be in a position to do much in terms of change. I know we've heard people say, let's play the Division III men's championship at the Frozen Four. Maybe let's play the women's championship at the same time at the Frozen Four, do it all in the same location. That would be hard because so much has been bid out. But Derek, I know you have more insight on that.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of different things. And the one thing I will tell you by going to the extra day in between, I think people were really, really concerned after the Duluth, North Dakota game last year of student athlete safety. And the goalies cramp up, players are cramping up. But I think by doing that, and then, I think that allows them. I mean, there's talk about what do you do after three overtimes? Do you keep playing? Do you go to a shootout? I want it to keep going. And by able to do that, it helps that process, because the last thing you want to see is a shootout to determine who goes to the Frozen Four after you played 6 periods. Do you end it to the next day? Those discussions would have happened if they would have got to the end of that overtime of what to do. And we were getting, there was text being shot around. Do we suspend the game till tomorrow? What do we do? And thank God it ended with a clean goal. But I think that helps. Super regionals would be awful difficult because of turnaround times. And once again, we bid out 4 regionals all the way through the Frozen Four. So you're also again talking 5 years. And the only other thing that I would say per se the big boys would be home sites in the first round or 2 out of 3. And I don't think that there's any appetite for that other than the perceived powerhouses who would want themselves in their building, and they don't want to be upset by an Atlantic hockey team who've done great jobs in the tournament. I don't see any appetite for that, but there's a lot of. I think the tournament is perfect the way it is, and you added it there. Why mess with it? And if you say it should be changed, it's usually self-serving.
I want to tiptoe into just a couple of things before we wrap up. Not getting in the midst of the discussion over the expansion of the women's program and an expansion to 11 teams in the NCAAs, but on 2 what I think are misconceptions about the NCAA. First of all, there seems to be this thought out there that the NCAA is like the board, bent on multiple planetary domination, and it's this faceless bureaucracy in Indianapolis that just hands down arbitrary decisions. The NCAA decisions are made up of people on committees from member schools, whether it's presidents, the whole assembly of teams, committees on rules or on championships. Derek, you served on the championship committee. There was people who are coaches and athletic directors who were making decisions about that thing, about those types of things. And then the other thing is about revenue. There's a criticism that, as a nonprofit, there should not be a pursuit of revenue. Well, you've got to pay for these tournaments somehow. And most of the tournaments don't generate as much money as it costs to put them on. So you need these big revenue generating events, men's and women's basketball, men's ice hockey, baseball, softball. Those are the ones that come to mind. But there's a lot of money that's required, and any money that's left over, it's not like they're spending it on fancy cars and trips into lower suborbit, but they're returning the money to the individual school. So maybe just step back. I've gotten to know a lot of the people around the NCAA, permanent staffers who work with men's ice hockey, who are terrific people and work hard and love the sport. And when I see the NCAA criticized as this faceless, evil bureaucracy, I have to say, step back a bit and really understand what's going on.
And I want to give a shout out on that to Kristen Fassbender, who is now moved on to a different role within the NCAA. She had been doing the championships for forever, and she was by far, they called her the den mother. she is by far world class at her job and as a person. And Chad Tolliver, who's now taking over, I spent a regional with Chad in Providence, and Chad is outstanding. He'll do a great job as well. And you got Ty Halpern and go down the list of people that were there. And I was fortunate to be on the committee. I only got 3 of my 4 years because obviously I'm not coaching this year, but Steve Metcalf for 2 years was the chair, and Mike Kemp was the chair. And we there were 6 of us that were making very impactful decisions. And if people thought that we were taking these decisions lightly, you're wrong. You talked to your constituents in your league, you talked to other people outside your league, and you spent a lot of time and you didn't get paid for it. And you're volunteering, and sometimes you get barbecued over things. But at very worst, you used to get once every 4 years, you'd get a really neat trip. And the other 3 would go to Indianapolis, and once in your 4-year cycle, you'd get a trip. And when I was on the rules committee, we got to go to Savannah, Georgia. But then they took the trip out because it was easier just to do it that way. So there was a lot of work for not a lot of glory. And these people, they put a lot of time, and they take a lot of pride in this. So to think that this is a faceless organization that just grabs money off of a tree out in their backyard to do all this stuff is a completely false narrative. And I do want to, like I said, shout out to Kristen because she's leaving hockey, and that's a big loss for us, whether the people know it or not.
Well, I think we'll wrap it right there. Thanks, Derek. Thanks, Jim. For Jim Connelly, for Derek Schooley, I'm Ed Trefzger. We'll catch you next week.
This has been the USCHO Weekend Review Podcast, a production of U.S. College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.